bear with me. I suck at public speaking. I hate doing it. So I wrote on this, so if you see me looking down, it's because I'm reading this. So being the youngest of 8, my mom had 4 boys and 4 girls. And regardless if any of us want to admit it or not, we always had our favorite. We always had our sibling that we were the closest to. Mine was my brother Josiah. Me and him made a very special connection because we enjoyed the exact same things. We both loved playing the guitar, and my vision of it, I thought if you just strum really loud, that was playing the guitar. And so Josiah quickly teaching me how to actually play tunes. I think he did it because he was just tired of hearing me loud strums. He taught me a lot in the woods, and that's where I like to go and spend my time now because that's where I was with him. And I mean, even though it's not the same, that's where I connect with him, is in the woods. And so being there now is what makes me happy. We both enjoyed climbing trees until I fell out of a tree and broke both my arms at the exact same time. Josiah was at home without knowing, he didn't know how bad I fell out of the tree, and he was making fun of me, telling everyone that I was gonna come home looking like a T-Rex. Little did he know I did. We both enjoyed hunting, so on Christmas one year, he bought me a BB gun, and I can't express to y'all how happy I was about that BB gun. I still have it to this day, but I was bouncing off the walls, and I was always on him, and I was like, let's go shoot the BB gun, let's go shoot. He taught me how to boil creek water, didn't know you could do that. He taught me how to build a cabin and countless of other things that have shaped me and benefited me in the long run. I was very attached to him, so attached that when he would leave for work, I would break down crying. Like, I would lay with my mom in bed because I missed him so much. On my birthday in 2015, it was my 14th birthday, he wrote to me on Facebook and said, "Happy birthday, Alyse. You have always pushed me to do the very best that I could because I know you're watching my every move. I'm so proud to have you as my sister and the youngest at that. I know you will go far with just your talent, but your personality is going to make you a star. And don't forget it, I love you to the ends of the earth and back." I love you to the ends of the earth and back was always something that me and him said to each other. I never heard it until he said it to me. He meant everything to me. He was my protector. One time, my family, we all took a rafting trip, and it was great for the first 3 hours, and then that last hour, my sister dropped her paddle, and so we were all trying to figure out how to navigate over to the paddle to get it back, and somewhere along the way, we got stuck on a rock, and our entire raft flipped over, threw all of us out. And I remember being trapped under this like 250-pound raft and trying to figure out how to get out, like how to get out from underneath it. So as I was trying to navigate to swim underneath, to go underneath it, I remember hitting a rock, and then out of nowhere, Josiah yanks me up out of the water. Me and him were standing on some rock in the middle of the river, and I instantly felt safe, and I wasn't scared as soon as he grabbed me. He was my role model. I looked up to him in ways that I could never describe. Most importantly, he was my best friend, all wrapped up into just being my big brother. Josiah always had encouraging words to say. He never came into contact with someone like a stranger. He had the biggest smile and loudest laugh, which were both very, very contagious. On December 10th, 2015, at 4:30 in the morning, my dad got up to go to work, and he was standing in the kitchen making his breakfast. And Josiah walked in and looked like he was upset. And so my dad gave him a hug and told him to go sit down in the living room. As Josiah went back to his room, my dad noticed that he was missing. And so the minute my dad walked back into his room to get him, the minute he went to go knock, we all woke up to a loud bang. My dad started screaming. My mom and my older sister over here in the living room calling 911. I thought I was still in a dream. I just thought I was dreaming. I thought it was a really bad nightmare. So as my mom's screams continued to get louder, I knew I wasn't dreaming. I quickly jumped up, and I found out that the chaos was coming from the back of the house where Josiah's room is. As I walked down the hallway, and I turned that corner and saw my dad on top of Josiah trying to save his life. I was in a panic. I didn't know what to do. You just stand there. Like, I felt nothing. I was shocked. So I went into the living room with my mom and sister, and we just waited for the ambulance while my dad and my other brothers were back there trying to help. And then once the ambulance arrived, we all got pushed outside, and it's December, it was freezing. It's 4 a.m. We were all standing outside, and I remember none of us knew what to say to each other, like, at all. So as the ambulance took Josiah to Greenville Memorial, my mom and sister followed, and then the police officer stayed to, like, question all of us to see if we had any idea as to why this happened. And I remember the officer taking us and interviewing us one by one, asking if we had any clue as to why he would do this. And all I remember telling the officer is Josiah was happy he didn't mean to do this. A few hours passed, and once the officers left, my dad was rounding all of us up to take us to the hospital. And I remember walking back to Josiah's room, and I saw his ring sitting there, and I took it. I knew he'd be mad at me if he took it out, but I took it because I wanted to have a piece of him with me. And so once we arrived at the hospital, my mom and my dad were allowed to be in the room, and that was it. They could sit in there with Josiah, and that was it. And so all of us siblings just sitting in the waiting room, none of us knew what to say to each other. Like, we were just as shocked. And then a few hours, it was like 4 hours at this point, had passed, and the doctors came in and said that one of us siblings could come in at a time and see Josiah. And so I waited to go last because Josiah always taught me that putting myself first wasn't an option, that I should always put other people first. So as I let everyone else go first, I waited around for my turn. And as I went as it was finally my turn and I got to go see him, all I remember is walking in that room, and I had no other words than please fight through this. As Josiah looked at me slowly, he barely got out. Please be strong for the rest of the family. As I wiped my tears, I told him I would. And actually, this time 6 years ago, we were all sitting there holding his hand. So he got moved to the ICU, and he had a breathing tube, so he couldn't talk. He was sleeping a lot. He was in a coma, so he was sleeping a lot. And he was in the ICU for about 4 or 5 days, and then he got moved to an actual room. And throughout that time, the waiting room at the hospital was so crowded because we're such a big family, and none of us ever wanted to leave. I remember me and my mom laying on the waiting room floor one night and just trying to get some sleep, like get a few minutes of sleep. And so as he got moved to an actual room, he stayed there for a day. And then the doctors came in and told us that it was time for him to go home, that he had healed enough, he could go home. And as Josiah kept begging them, he was like, no, I'm coughing up blood. I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home. And they insisted that that he needed to go home. And so on December 17th, he was discharged from Greenville Memorial. And the night when he came home, the first thing I did was move a chair into his room. And I sat there. Every night, I sat there. I stayed by his side like it was a job for me. Like I'd signed a piece of paper saying that this was my job. I made sure he had his medicine on time. And I had all of his little Mountain Dews and snacks right by the bedside. We watched a lot of movies together throughout those few nights, and we had many conversations. We talked about how thrilled we were that 2016 was right around the corner and it was a fresh start and we could start over, have a better year. I played softball for Pickens High School. or I played softball growing up, and I had the opportunity to try out for Pickens High School team, even though I was homeschooled. My parents homeschooled all 8 of us. And so going into that, I was very anxious. I didn't want to do it. I didn't know anyone. It wasn't, like, I didn't have a ton of friends. And I expressed this to Josiah, and I was like, I'm just not going to do it. Like, I'm not going to do it. And he said that I have to try out. And I quickly was like, you're crazy. It's not happening. I was like, you're absolutely ridiculous. He made a deal with me, and he told me that if I tried out, he would be at every single game no matter what. Quickly, I shook his hand, and I said, all right. We laughed and told jokes about the things that we have done together in the past. And then I was getting in the shower one night, and I was like, hey, Josiah, call me if you need me. Like, I'll have my phone on. And as I got in the shower, I was in there for about 2 minutes. And then my phone starts ringing. And so I quickly get out, and he's like, come here, hurry. Like, I need you, come here. So I go in there, and he's got his biggest Josiah grin on his face. Huge. And he was pointing at his floor, and I was like, what? What's going on? He was like, there's an ant. There's an ant somewhere on the floor. And I was standing there with just a towel wrapped around me. I didn't have anything else on but a towel. And we busted out laughing. And I was like, you made me get out of my shower for this, for an ant? His ring that I took off the nightstand the morning everything happened, he noticed it, and he was yelling at me, and he was like, you're going to lose that. And I was like, I'm not going to lose it. And he kept telling me that I was going to misplace it or lose it somewhere along the way, and that was his favorite ring, and that I better not. And so I promised, he made me promise him that I would never misplace it, which I still wear it. Right here, this is his ring. On December 22nd, we both woke up with full spirits. We were so excited. We were excited that Christmas was 3 days away. We talked about what we were going to do for Christmas, what Christmas gifts we were going to buy, when we were going to go shopping. My parents had to take our dog to the vet. I think it was like the only time the vet allowed him to come, and it was a puppy, so it needed to go to the vet. And then a couple of my other siblings had to go off to work. So me and Josiah were in the living room, and my other 2 siblings that were there were asleep, taking naps. And so I asked him if there was anything I could do for him or if he needed anything, and he was like, no, I'm okay. So I went and got a quick shower. And then when I got out, we were sitting there and we were talking for a little bit, and then he was like, can you get me a pillow for my butt? And I was like, you're crazy. And he was like, no, like, it's really sore. I really need a pillow. And I was like, okay. So I gave him a pillow, and 15 minutes after that, I noticed he was taking really deep breaths. And I was like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? Is everything okay? And he kept saying that he was fine, that not to worry about him. And so things progressively got worse within 30 minutes. Like, he couldn't breathe. And so I looked at him, and I was like, I'm going to call 911, and I don't care what you say. And so the minute he said, do that and please hurry, is when I knew that something wasn't right. And so I ran and got my other brother that was there, and I told him to get up, like, I needed help. I didn't know what was going on. I was 14, like, I had no idea what was going on. We called my parents, and we were like, you need to get home, like, now. And 911 was already on their way. I called them, and I was trying to express to them where we live and tell them how to get to our house without knowing what to do. I was panicking. So my parents actually arrived before the ambulance ever got there. And when my parents got inside, they realized how serious it actually was. Like, it was pretty bad. And so we were all sitting there. We were like, where's 911? Where's 911? Like, where's the ambulance? And me and my mom called 4 times 911 to figure out where they're at. Like, why are they not here? And so 20 minutes had passed. And by the time the ambulance got there, we knew Josiah was gone. We knew, like, he couldn't catch his breath. My dad tried CPR, it didn't work. And I remember this flannel right here is the one he wore that day. Because he started sweating when he started breathing hard, and I took this flannel off of him. As the ambulance took Josiah, once they got there, I think when they got there, they knew it was serious, and so they kicked all of us out of the house. They told us to get outside, that they didn't want us to see anything. So we all go outside, and we're standing there as a family, and then we see Josiah's body be taken past us, and once the ambulance left, my parents instantly jumped in the car and followed him. They took him to Pickens Cannon, and they were there for what felt like forever to me, but it was about 30 minutes. And then I was sitting in my parents' room, and I was like, please be okay. Please be okay. And my phone rang, and I heard it was my dad. And I was like, I don't know what this is about. Like, this can't be good. And the things that my dad said, I never imagined would come out of his mouth, ever. The minute he said he's gone, gather everyone and get to the hospital, that was something I never expected my dad to ever say to me. I walked out of the room and I went and told my parents, or my other siblings, something that I'd never, I didn't even know how to pronounce the words. I didn't know how to let them out. The rest of us got into the car and we rushed to Cannon. When we got there, we were all sitting there as a family and we just didn't know what to do. None of us knew what was going on. We stood in the parking lot of Cannon Memorial, and I remember we just all held each other. We had nothing to say to each other. We just stood there and cried, and we held each other, and it was very hard. We went into the room that had Josiah's body in it, and I remember seeing his face, and I've never felt a pain like that in my entire life. The next few days were very, very blurry to me. I don't remember a lot of them. It was the happiest time of the year, and it was the worst time of the year for my entire family. On Christmas Eve, we all woke up and went to the funeral home to see Josiah's body for the last time. I kissed his forehead and I said, I have it from here. My life after him was very different. I was very numb. I didn't know what to, I honestly didn't grieve about this until recently. I feel like I ran. Once the softball tryouts came around, I didn't know what to do. I was like, he's not here, the deal's over. I finally had the courage to do it anyways, to honor him. I made varsity my first time trying out. Being on the field and on bases, I kept saying, Josiah, you're supposed to be here. I looked for him everywhere, and as time passed, I started to put a lot of anger into God. That's who I took my anger out on. I was very angry at him for taking my brother. I bet there were many nights that I begged God to take my life instead, that he should have taken me instead. I begged for something tragic to just happen, to where I didn't have to live without my brother anymore. I started to cope with drugs and self-harm. And on March 10th, 2017, I had an overdose. I was rushed to Greenville Memorial. I don't really remember any of it. I just know I woke up in Greenville Memorial in a hospital bed with my parents standing right over me and tears just falling down their eyes. That minute, I began to become very disappointed in myself. I told myself that Josiah wasn't happy with me, that he would not be proud of who I am. And so I started looking for other ways to cope, and those weren't good ways either. Those alcohol and self-harm, and I kept coping and not healing. And I was trying to figure out why I wasn't healing, because I was trying to cope. Or I was trying to work on the things that I had issues with. I ran from everyone and everything. Anytime I got attached to anyone, I would instantly run away. I was so scared to lose somebody, and it hurt that bad. Many nights, I would want to be locked in my room and not be around anyone. I had a very bad relationship with my entire family at this point because of how much pain I was in. I was constantly rude to other people, and I would take my anger out on everyone, my parents, my siblings. I felt alone. I felt like I didn't have anyone. And my anxiety when I would go places was so bad that I could barely go places. My parents would constantly ask me to come to church with them, just keep asking me to come to church, and I would be like, no. Like, why would I want to go to church? And when I'm mad at God, he took my best friend. In 2019, I kept jumping from houses to different apartments to different jobs because every time I got somewhere and I thought it was going to make me happy, I would run from it. I wanted happiness, but I didn't want to feel hurt when the happiness went away. So I just kept running. I kept running away from everything. At the beginning of this year, I got down and I begged God to come do something to me. I didn't really know what it meant. I just heard my mom always talk about how God is there for her and how she goes to him, and I didn't trust it at first. I was like, this isn't gonna work. This is dumb. Like, this is a waste of time. It's not gonna work. So at the beginning of this year, I begged an intervention to happen in my life. Like, begged. A few months passed and I woke up and I had this random thought, and it was the words homicide detective, and I was like, what is that? That's okay. Heard that a couple times, but I'm not really quite sure what that means. So I started doing research, and it's like 4 a.m, and I was like, how do you become a homicide detective? And I saw that you needed a college degree, and I was like, no. I was like, I'm not smart enough to go to college. I was like, I don't like college. I didn't like academics in high school. Like, I hated high school. And so I was like, no, I'm not. I can't do that. And I got really discouraged because that thought woke me up, and I was like, but I can't get a college degree. So a few months passed, and I got woken up again, and I started doing research about what do you have to do to get into college. And I didn't have the best GPA in high school because I didn't like high school, so I didn't try. So I was so worried that I wasn't going to be smart enough, or I didn't have what it took to get there. Well, once I figured out that it does, like, I can do it, and I had faith in myself, and I knew that if God was waking me up like this, like telling me to do something, that I should probably do it. I ran outside to tell my parents one day on the deck, and I was like, I want to go to college. And they were like, no. They were like, they told me no. They told me that I wasn't being serious because I kept running from everything in the past. They knew that I would get used to something and then run. And they didn't want to spend all the money to have me there and then me just drop out. So I think as they realized that I was being serious, they saw me taking steps to figure out how to get there and where I should go. And one day, one of my friends that goes to Brevard College was like, hey, you should apply here. So I got on that night and I searched it up, and I was like, what do you have to do to get here or get accepted? And once I took the steps, I filled out an application, and some lady like emailed me back and she was like, we need you to write an essay so we can see where you're at, like what you're like, how you are academically. And so I messed around and I was like, I don't know what to write. And I would write things and I would delete it. I would write things and I would delete it because I wasn't sure. After I talked with my mom and then I went to Marie's that day and I talked to her and Allie about it, I went to bed that night and I woke up the next morning and Josiah was on my mind. And I was like he's on my mind every day, but he was really on my mind that day. And so I quickly got my laptop and I started typing things, and sure enough, within an hour I had an entire essay written about Josiah's entire life. And I submitted it, and I waited. And I was very discouraged waiting because it was a very long waiting period for me. I'm the kind of person that I want instant results. I don't like waiting. So I waited. I had to figure out what patience was, and I had to have patience. And then one day I went to go check the mail, and sure enough, there was a piece of mail from Brevard, and on the front it said, "You're Brevard bound." And I opened it, and it said, "You're accepted." And I was reading. I instantly broke out into tears at my mailbox at the end of my street. I was reading it, and they talked about my essay, and they were like, "This is probably one of the best essays that we've ever read." And so my parents were out of town, and I quickly called them, and I was like, "Oh my God," like freaking out. And at that point, I knew that God woke me up those nights. He wanted me to do this, like. And I was like, but why homicide detective? Why do I want to do that? Why me? And I realized that all these years I've spent questioning, like I've wanted answers. I've wanted to know why my brother did that, why this happened. Like there's so many whys that I've wanted to know and what ifs. And if me as a homicide detective can give any family peace or answers, that's what I want to do. That'll make me happy. And so in August, I moved into Brevard, and that was a fresh start. Like I had battled, and when I begged God to just break me down and build me back up, I know that in August was Him building me back up. As my first semester comes to an end with finals next week, and I'm happy to say that I have maintained straight A's this entire semester. I know without a doubt that without God, I wouldn't be here. I know He met me where I was. That was the thing. God met me where I was every single time. I know that everything that I do from this point on is for my brother. And I know that me becoming a homicide detective is because of the experience I had losing my brother. But I know that God is a personal God. And I know that He will always meet me in the middle of where I'm at. And He will never leave me, just like He didn't the day that I lost Josiah, or the day that I was laying in a hospital bed, or even now. I know that God got me through this semester. But there's no days that I don't miss Josiah and I don't think about him. Yesterday was the anniversary of the morning that he shot himself, and I remember my heart was so heavy yesterday. I remember I called my mom last night and I was like, "Mom, I can't do it. I was like, "I can't." And my mom quickly sent me over some Bible verses. But I know where I'm at now. I'm happy. I love where I go to school. And I know that this is a part of God's plan. But I'm thankful for all of the things that I've experienced, because now I can help other people. People at school come to me all the time with wanting advice, and I'm so happy to help them with pointing them in the right direction. And the first thing I ever say to them is, I can't fix your problems, but I know God can. But yeah, it's my story.